Hello everyone, I'm Emily Wamendimove, editor of Farmer IQ and Farmer Logistics IQ, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Proactively See, Understand and Continuously Improve Global End-to-End Delivery Performance, brought to you in association with Transvoyant. It is a pleasure to introduce you to our panelists today, James Batira, Vice President of Customer Growth at Transvoyant, David Kamjati, Director of Logistics Transformation at Merck Pharmaceuticals, and Dr. Anakin Essien, Lecturer in Information Systems at the University of Sussex Business School, who will be chairing today's discussion. In our panel today, the experts will explore how to enhance global supply chain transparency and situational awareness to proactively save shipments, improve customer service, and avoid unnecessary operational spending. However, before I hand you over to our speakers to kick off today's panel, I'd like to quickly remind you this is an interactive webinar. You can send your questions to our presenter at any time via the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. Please include your name along with your question, and we'll aim to answer these during the Q&A following the presentation. There are also some standout content pieces from our friends at Transvoyant sitting just below the presentation slides. Among them, our exclusive report that we developed in collaboration with Transvoyant, titled Farmers' Path to Supply Chain Transparency. We encourage you all to check out the content pieces featured in today's session, as the topics follow on very nicely from today's discussion. So with those short housekeeping notes out the way, I'd like to hand you over to Jim to kick us off with a brief overview of Transvoyant before diving into the panel discussion with David and Anakin. Please take it away, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Appreciate everyone joining us today. Welcome. As Emily said, I lead the customer growth organization here at Transvoyant. Transvoyant is an organization that's been around since 2012. We focus on insights and analytics across our customer supply chains, providing actionable intelligence, primarily through greater transparency and live situational awareness of what's occurring across the supply chain. You can see in this brief little image here, just a screen grab of what the solution itself looks like. It's a SaaS-based offering. We also provide professional services in the way of system and data integration with the trading partner ecosystem, as well as insight development and, in some cases, even application development. So we're happy to be here with IQPC and the rest of the panel, and I look forward to a lively discussion. Thank you.
Anakin, over to you to kick off today's presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Emily. So welcome, everyone. As Emily said, I am Dr. Anakin Essien. I am a lecturer in information systems at the University of Sussex in the United Kingdom. And so we would go over our panel of questions today. So as a summary, a recent study conducted by Farmer Logistics IQ, sponsored by Transvoyant, titled Farmers' Path to Supply Chain Transparency, which you can access in the related contents widget on your console page. And what the findings of that report showed is that having supply chain transparency and situational awareness are very useful in benefiting both daily operations and longer-term continuous improvements. However, the findings from that report also showed that building a business case to secure the funding and wrangling the data obtained were the two biggest challenges. So today's panelists have succeeded in confronting these challenges, and they are willing to share their insights on this. So in a minute, I would be asking them how they've done this, so that you can maybe gain some insight from this. I'll start off with David. David, can you tell us about the journey you and the Merck team are on? How did this journey begin, and maybe why? How is it progressing, and what outcomes you are achieving in this journey towards supply chain transparency?
Thanks for the question, Anakin, and thank you, Jim, for connecting me to IQPC so we could talk a little bit about Merck's journey to develop what we call a digital logistics program. So how and why? I think like many other companies in the latter part of the last decade, Merck found themselves on this journey to start digitizing everything that they were looking at. And our senior leadership declared that our future success really required we had this digital strategy. There are tremendous headwinds in the pharma space. So many of my colleagues on this call know and understand there's soaring R&D costs, patent loss, generic competition, market access, the pricing. And I think in particular, this shift in manufacturing, supply chain complexity continues to kind of move from this small molecule, high volume, ambient profile products towards this larger molecule, smaller volume, cold chain, frozen, ultra low temperature product. Really raising the cost and the challenges to support how we move product, really can't afford to lose product, lose a dose. I think all these pressures kind of came together and said, how do we improve that cost to serve model? How do we stay competitive? And it really aligned with this digitization concept that was coming out around 2018 around the right people, processes, and digital programs and technologies to deliver value to the business, to the stakeholders, and to the patients. The initiative within Merck, rightfully so, called Fortify Our Future, was company-wide. It was sponsored top-down across all divisions, and we were really just tasked with developing a digital roadmap that set out to address meaningful business problems and with proving digital technology. We couldn't just throw new technology into the mix. We needed to reimagine our ways of working, and we need to really try to figure out how do we unlock the full value potential of deploying new technologies. And we needed to build digital capabilities where they were lacking today for the future and have well-developed business cases and use cases that were targeting the existing large business challenges we had. And then lastly, they said, hey, you have to do this and you have to do this fast. Deliver value as quickly as possible. So I kind of joked, this brought about that whole agile approach that was coming with the digitization process. And I would joke to say, well, they've asked us to fly the plane while we're building it. So that was really, the backdrop. And so it was us getting in a room, talking about what the big problems were in the logistics transportation arena where I was leading, right product to the right place, right time, in the right condition were issues we were faced with in the international transportation space. It was high value product focusing on a significant portion of the supply chain budget. We sat down, we developed those use cases, and we talked about how could a digital infrastructure improve and or potentially mitigate some of the issues we were facing with. And we were able to sit down and really talk about, for example, product discards and claims were easy for us to quantify. We were able to put a number around that and ask how would real-time visibility and IoT devices potentially offset losses in this space with negative transportation events occurring? We reviewed key lanes that were on supply allocation and asked how improved visibility would support inbound planning and help align upstream lead time parameters. We asked how visibility to events globally occurring in big data, whether it was geopolitical, port closings, things of that nature that we could see become actionable. So ultimately, we came to this space where we understood we had some significant capability weaknesses, and we boiled them down to a list within our digital program that we needed to go solve for. So we know we didn't have no real-time visibility to shipment conditions during transportation. Our data was fragmented and not well integrated across Merck's enterprise systems. Lack of predictive analytics, no connection to this external big data that could talk about disruptive events happening, unable to generate any sort of alerts or notifications, and lastly, and probably most importantly, we were missing the ability to enable quick decision-making that translated into actions for us. So in August of 2019, we partnered with Transvoyant to solve these capability weaknesses and they became our digital logistics virtual control tower. We kicked off a proof of concept in 2019 of August of 2019. We started small with 10 lanes, 4 of which had active monitors on it. And by the end of December 2019, we had demonstrated the value and power of having an integrated digital logistics control tower that brought visibility to our shipments in transit by showing the ability to intervene in distressed shipments. We were able to connect large data sets that delivered ETA, PTA reports on inbound planning and so forth. Where we are today, we never looked back from there. We're now actively monitoring over 400 lanes. We've deployed well over 2,500 IoT devices that monitor our health metrics of our shipments in transit. We fully integrated business rules with our 3PLs and work closely with Transvoyant's team, TV Care, on improving event monitoring and intervention practices. I would say to date, we've successfully claimed interventions against 25 shipments, and I guess we are approaching almost 1 million doses of medicine saved as a result of actions taken during in-transit handling. So it's a huge milestone that we'll be coming up on, and quite honestly, I hope we don't get there, right? But those include everything from notifying Maersk of ocean container failures due to the motherboard not working and reporting properly, so they've replaced that CPU in transit. We've directly requested product be placed into cold storage, both at origin and destination airports, because of active container failures and or in-transit delays that were going to impact TPS, pack out expiration. We've deployed ETA, PTA reporting to support inbound planning for allocated products. And as a added benefit, we realized that the inbound regions who are getting these reports were able to use them to improve their monthly and quarterly freight accrual process for budgeting. We were able to get quick visibility to the impact of the Suez Canal and the Evergreen blockage just by easily circling over the Suez Canal. We could see any containers that were in the canal that were being tracked through Transvoyant. And even more recently, there was a disruption in South Africa where ports were being impacted due to an event down there, and we were able to quickly get a list of shipments going to those ports and work with the site to actually delay those shipments from leaving and work with corporate security on getting them cleared before they went. So I'll probably wrap up there. We have a lot more in terms of where we see ourselves going next around utilization of machine learning and AI and so forth. And then ultimately, we see ourselves linking our digital logistics control tower into the end-to-end supply chain control tower coming in the next few months.
Wow, thank you very much, David, for that. Obviously, I suppose due to the scale of global supply chains now, it's almost impossible to achieve that, level of customer satisfaction without some sort of digitization technology. Like you've mentioned, you tend to integrate AI, machine learning, and the likes. Thank you very much for that. Jim, are David's comments consistent with what you kind of hear from other customers regarding business drivers, and why do customers choose to partner with Transvoyant?
Yes, we do see other customers, looking to do the same thing. I would say, in Merck's case, they're much further down the path. I think, their starting point was a much more evolved vision of what they wanted. The journey is the same, but the place in which we engage with customers can be different. With many kind of earlier on in the planning informative stages of the journey. So, and that includes even within life sciences. So I think the outcomes are also the same, right? It's customer service is part and parcel to everybody's business case, and the outcomes they're looking to affect, if you will. I would say cost and cost avoidance would be probably second to customer service outcomes, and then just a greater ability to be more resilient. And I think, this past 18 months or so have really kind of proven, why that is important, given all the instances occurring, around the globe. So we define resiliency as, excuse me, the proactive ability to resist and recover, when these delays and disruptions happen. I think, David mentioned a variety of feature function capabilities that we enable, not the least of which is the automation we land, the machine learning, the rules-based conditions and notifications that we can provide that help to put our customers' teams in a much more proactive posture. And I think that, coupled with our ability to kind of serve these sites up in a way that are as intuitive and immediately or readily actionable, is also important, as well as, our ability to provide those wraparound services, if you will, like, for wrangling the data. The data is a challenge. Merck has the benefit of having a single SAP instance. A lot of our customers don't. A lot of customers have accumulated technical debt along the way through acquisition and what have you. And therefore, even within their four walls, it can be challenging in kind of wrangling the data in order to be in a position to actually action it. And then you add to it, all the data that's outside the enterprise that needs to be brought into the picture, what we call the common operating picture, others call it a digital twin, so that you have the visibility to that end-to-end network. And then once you've got the visibility, you can apply the machine learning to better understand it. And then once you're able to model it, you can look for opportunities to improve it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, James, for that. Data wrangling, you mentioned that severally. That's like say 80% of the job of data analytics. Thank you very much, Jim, for that. This question is for David now. David, can you provide some insights on sort of the challenges, the pitfalls to avoid on this journey? So, with if you can, providing more emphasis on this PPT, people, process, and technology or systems standpoint.
Sure, Anakin, and this is a big question, so I've jotted down a few points against each of those. But I'd also like to point out that there really is a fourth element that cuts across all this, and that's that data comment that you guys just mentioned. Data just makes this entire thing work. So from a technology and system perspective, and thinking about the challenges. Let's see, Jim kind of called it out right. I mean, our vision was really about connecting our instance of our ERP instance in SAP, our TMS application, which was a global TMS application, along with IoT devices, along with our passive packouts that had IoT on them, along with our passive Temptail data, along with our 3PL data. We had a very intricate model, and it required a lot of integration into Transvoyant as our logistics cloud hub. There's a lot of time and resources that you need to be ready to mobilize and be ready to have detailed IT conversations with these partners to get them to integrate. And you need to watch out for partners that are sluggish in creating IT connections, and or once you have them connected, fail to provide you with critical data. It kind of exposes a little bit where they are in their journey to update their own architecture and systems. And of course, there's some system nuances too that you need to be aligned with as well around IT data architecture and the data plan, data architecture plan itself. So timeliness of data, accurate data, complete data. These are things that kind of, when you have it in a two-dimension sketch in front of you, that you think, oh, the line connects. But in 3 dimensions, when you overlay process and you realize that there's varying processes, so that probably will bring me right into the next point. I laugh because we talk about having global standard business processes that aren't global or standard. Jim mentioned we have a single instance of SAP, which has a global operating model, but yet when we got out to the sites and we started to review with them our deployment model and how we saw them integrating with using the IoT devices, scanning them, linking them, we realized that not all of the sites were actually executing an SAP around handling unit labels as a really simple one to call out. But we had to go back and go through reprocess design with certain sites and share with them what that global process was, and then get them to move towards the global process that was in place. And in some instances, they had reasons why they weren't doing it that way, so we had to do some workaround. So keep an eye towards what that really looks like. And again, it's all about getting the data connected at the right time and right place. People are creative. They find ways to get around things around TMS, and just non-compliance using spot quotes out there would break some of the connection we have with our 3PL partners. And so when we would feed the TMS link into Transvoyant, some data was missing, and that would disable visibility. So there's pieces there around process that you need to be consistent with and understand where data is coming from when these processes aren't being executed right. And then the people side of it really just talks about who are all these folks within the business who are executing, driving business processes in all of the enterprise systems or ecosystems that you're using and feeding into your global hub. So you have to really engage with them early on. Get them part of the journey, get them to understand what the end state is, and then really set some clear expectations with them too, right? Because they're going to see in a proof of concept things that aren't necessarily going to be fully accurate. It could create some confusion, so you want to monitor their expectations in terms of what they're seeing, because you're not at scale yet. And a good example in terms of bringing the right people to the table, in one of our shipping sites in the Netherlands, we had engaged with the full site go live team. There was responsibility to engage with a set of folks to approve the application going live, and last minute the site quality person came in and asked whether or not the system was a GXP validated system. And we were very clear about it not being. It was an business execution tool. But he called out one component of the business process and basically said that specific portion needed to be GXP compliant due to Alcoa principles, and we were linking our validated temp tail data in through here. So it kind of put a wrinkle into the process at the last second in terms of going live. So having the right people there. And then lastly, data. It's a big topic, but start small with understanding what is critical to create visibility, where you're pulling key data elements from, whether or not it's your master bill. Make sure that if your 3PL partners are documenting your customer reference numbers to create that data linkage, that there's really clear understanding of how you see that working, and then kind of start simple and work towards something more complex, and seek to build out flexible data models where you can. And Transvoyant has been real good at that. Where we sometimes are missing master airway bills, because TV goes direct to steamship lines, airlines, to get those direct feeds in. We still sometimes get the house bill from our forwarder, and we're getting milestones sent from our forwarder. So I don't want people to log into TV as our single visibility platform and see that a shipment's still in a waiting status when in fact it's left. And I don't want TV to say it's in a waiting status, because they're getting a signal from our forwarders and another set of data. So working around some of the nuances around data is a big part of this.
Thank you very much, David, for that. Data and technology. How do you ensure cross-platform compatibility as well? Thank you very much, David. For you, Jim, can you add to this? What challenges do you see as well from the customer side of things, and how are your customers sort of overcoming these challenges?
Yes, I'll pick up where David kind of left off there. I think it really starts with the data. And understanding, what it can and can't do. So, we have engaging with new customers, we have somewhat of a checklist or a process we follow. One is the business case there. If not, we need to put one there. Two, do the use cases support the business case? And then three, does the data support the use cases? And really, this is where we like to spend a considerable amount of time. And my recommendation would be to do it earlier as opposed to later. In some cases, where the step is not taken, you kind of have a rude awakening, later in the process to learn that, something that you want to do can't be done because the data won't support it. So we go through very early in an engagement to understand the data flows and determine whether or not, just on paper, on a whiteboard, if the use cases themselves can be supported. As we know, the supply chains today, as they exist right now, are emitting an awful lot of data. And we see customers taking two types of approaches: the comprehensive approach that Merck is taking, and then others kind of go use case by use case. And I think the more comprehensive understanding yields a greater return on investment with far lower risk with respect to project as well as financial risk. So if you look at the slide here on the left, a lot of this data is data that David mentioned that we're kind of bringing in to color that common operating picture or digital twin and provide that situational awareness. Many of the use cases that were on the table very early in the process are kind of depicted here on the right. Once the plumbing and the platform is in place and the data is flowing, adding additional use cases and broadening the, what you call situational awareness happens more easily and more cost effectively. So I think this is why I'm pointing out, I think it really is about the data. And then over time, I think the data problems begin to resolve themselves with standards bodies emerging, blockchain technology emerging. I think these things will remedy themselves, but until then, you do have to wrangle it, and we're a good partner for that.
Thank you very much, James. And David, so how do you anticipate that the work you're doing, today will evolve? So what's is there more innovation to come, and how will the benefits that Merck is realizing now, will they increase or broaden from here? So what's the scope of future plan?
Yeah. So I absolutely think the benefits will continue to increase as we continue to scale the solution to additional shipping sites, which also includes a process to bring onto the platform our CMOs and external manufacturing partners into the visibility platform. So we'll have more opportunities to deploy more IoT devices, gain more data, be able to potentially intervene in those shipments that are distressed. So it'll continue to increase from that perspective. And then, it'll broaden in terms of the next 12 months as we continue to work to integrate our digital logistics sub-control tower into the broader end-to-end supply chain control tower to deliver, deeper visibility between the nodes is what I say to those guys. And, I'll be working with them more closely and working with end-to-end planning folks on what signals from TV will drive upstream and downstream supply planning actions. For instance, what do they do if they receive an alarm signaling that the product's going to arrive with a temperature excursion and would most likely be discarded? Is that a trigger for a replacement order, for instance? And that's something that they put into that end-to-end control tower process. So there's a lot there too to unpack, but it will continue to deliver more visibility, and we'll see value on the end-to-end control tower piece. Regarding more innovation, of course, right? There's going to be all sorts of crazy innovation coming down the pike. And, but I think, back to the broadening, of value creation with the existing technologies where I think the big opportunity is over the next, say, 12, 24 months, and with advancements in IoT technology and it's scaling to a point where the price point is going to make it affordable to put more devices on more shipments, battery technology changing, global infrastructure improvements around broadband and 5G and satellite broadband will continue to improve this ability to collect all this data and drive that into our logistics cloud hub, which when we partnered with Transvoyant, we were looking for somebody who had that machine learning and AI capability. And I think that that's really where the big opportunity is going to be, is finally allow the data to come in, get it to that critical mass of data so the machine learning can start to kind of apply those more sophisticated algorithms and develop insights that will drive and improve logistics execution, supply network planning, and things like that. And I also think it'll be a great opportunity for machine learning to help with the data quality piece. Everything from naming convention support to geolocations that aren't necessarily accurate, and help the business make better decisions about what we're seeing in the network today. And that'll continue to improve and streamline into continuous improvement opportunities. I'd be remiss if I didn't say blockchain. I used to be really cautious about using it. But I do think it's getting to a point now where more and more business partners are wanting to join unified blockchain programs. And I think when we finally get there with it, we'll kind of go from that visibility that we're at now at, let's say, the pallet level down to the SKU level and even, down to the pill level as things move through the infrastructure and through the transportation chain.
Thank you, David. You've mentioned blockchain, machine learning, IoT, digital twins. These are emerging and existing technologies that definitely would drive resilience and transparency in supply chains. Thank you, James. How about you? How would Transvoyant evolve and continue to serve its customers in the future?
Yeah, I think it is broadening the use cases we can address, under this umbrella of situational awareness and in those use cases. I think that's where, trust me, we have a pretty large backlog of things our development team wants to do. It's really just a matter of time and attention in getting it done. So I think you'll see us go there. One of the things we're recognizing too is we're able to provide an awful lot in the way of capabilities. But in many cases, our customers really just don't have the manpower, the bandwidth to actually consume the actual intelligence we provide. So I think our care team is going to be more of a focal point on a forward basis in terms of how we go to market. So by augmenting our customers' teams with our own team, potentially as the first line of support, if you will, in following SOPs and escalation paths and working with the trading ecosystem to resist and recover, when disruptions occur, is going to be integral on a forward basis. So those are really the two ways it's advancing, as well as just traditional classic product development in doing things better, faster, cheaper, if you will, of what we already do today. So we're not going to stop innovating.
Thank you, Jim. Mm-hmm. Okay, very insightful. David, what sort of counsel or recommendation would you give to others, i.e. audience members or people who are actually listening and who are trying to follow a similar path as you? What sort of counsel or recommendations would you provide?
If they're at the start of the journey, I would say take the time to develop that strong value proposition for your program that you can quantify, and work with finance on what value capture means, and challenge them on what value looks like. Example, when we started down this journey of mitigating lost shipments and loss prevention, it wasn't just about the replacement of product goods and the cost avoidance of having to remanufacture that and reship it. In some instances, there is significant lost sales in markets, especially on allocated products. So we were able to really talk through what that could look like and able to claim that against value. But maybe even more importantly, and taking a step back, is document your vision board. What does your program look like? What technologies do you think you need to include to be successful? And have kind of some sort of idea of where the overlap between those people, processes, and systems start to diverge from the current state, and where the value is for the future state. Start small, scale up, and kind of go from there and target your big problems so you can really look to get some early wins. We did target a key ocean lane that we had been struggling with, and we were able to get an early win by mitigating a loss on that particular lane, and it really was able to help prove part of the value proposition we had put forward. Be agile, be nimble as best you can. Merck, big pharma, just tons of red tape. So as nimble and agile as we like to say we can be, it can be difficult, but learn fast, fail fast if you need to, and move on. We have some examples where when we first started off, we're on our third IoT provider. We kept learning in terms of what requirements, how those IoT devices were going to function, and we moved on from the ones that we didn't think we needed or weren't meeting our expectations, and could link into our cloud application, and which is why having an agnostic cloud provider was so critical for us. So, and celebrate your victories and share your vision, and get that out there and get excitement around your program and get sponsorship with leadership, because that is needed, especially when you start asking for money to put this stuff in place. So make people get excited about this, because it's the future, and if you fail to prepare now, then you'll pay the consequences later.
Okay, thank you, David. Same question for you, Jim.
Yeah.
What recommendations do you have for your someone who is trying to?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what David said. I would say dare to think bigger. It's never been easier or more cost effective to drive real transformational change. I never asked David this question, but if he were to have tried to do what he's doing with us today, 5 years ago, let's say, I'm sure things would be much different, in terms of the cost of getting it done. I see an awful lot. We're talking to literally all 25 of the top 25 pharma companies at some level. And have many conversations, and often we see them starting small, which is fine, but so narrow that they run the risk of actually reinforcing the silos within the corporate infrastructure and functional areas that have served to kind of create the challenge that exists, right? So by kind of elevating what can be done at a more enterprise level, and benefit more broadly across section or of functional teams. David mentioned quality here today, the logistics operations folks, the customer service. There's many people who can be impacted and benefit from this type of solution. So that would be That would be my one recommendation. The other one, David kind of just touched on it, was the importance of having an infrastructure that's agnostic to the technology and the service providers in the market, right? Because you need to anticipate change. And David mentioned, they've made some changes already. Just in the short time we've been working with them, change will be constant. And, depending on how you architect the solution, what impact would that have, that change have? Would it be kind of a hiccup, or would it be catastrophic if you wanted to go in a different direction some number of years down the road? So those would be my two recommendations.
Thank you very much, Jim and David, and to all the attendees. We've come to the end of the panel. I would just summarize by touching on these two events, which are brilliant. Panelists have also talked about, COVID and the Suez Canal issue. And just to say, that there's a new buzzword now: supply chain resilience, supply chain transparency, and this would actually be driven very effectively by digitization, by technology. These two would play a significant role in actually enabling supply chains to achieve this, because it goes without saying that, this the globalization of supply chains comes with its own risks. You talk about just-in-time supply chains and the attendant risks that come with them as well. So these two, technology and digitization, would play a significant role in achieving supply chain resilience and transparency. Okay, thank you very much, Jim. Thank you very much, David. I'll hand back over now to Emily, who would chair the live Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Anakin.
Thank you, Anakin.
So I think attendees can definitely agree with me, guys. That was a great discussion. For me, I've never really been sitting back and being the attendee, but I was very involved in your discussion and taking notes on my end. So thank you for that as well. And thank you, Anakin, for chairing today as well and taking that ownership on that, and for the roundup of the insights at the end. And my final thank you is really to the attendees who have been sending in their questions throughout the session. We're going to be doing a Q&A with Jim and David now. So please do keep them coming, and we'll try to answer as many as possible in the time that we have left. But to really kick us off, David, we've had a question here come in from an audience member, Jim. So Jim, another Jim here, and thank you for sending in your question. For container shipments, air and ocean, there are multiple partners in the E2E movement. So he gives the example here of forwarders, airlines, ground handling, brokers, etc. So how does the visibility and intervention work between the different providers to enable a seamless transaction?
So thanks for the question. The first thing we looked to do was bring visibility to the platform via the IoT device. So as it's moving through the transportation chain and going through the multiple handoffs between all of those partners that work between the nodes, that we're able to ingest that data, get a geolocation, and apply it against our business rules for health metrics, specifically around temperature monitoring. So we use that as the basis, and we're using those signals, that data that we keep receiving back. And then we partner specifically with our 3PLs. I always say that they are our boots on the ground. They are the experts in moving freight through the supply chain for us. So we have established, working with TV carriers, a process where if an alert occurs based on those business rules, that we will send that out to our forwarder, and we'll include a link from Transvoyant that will actually show where the shipment is, the physical location across the globe, and we'll also give them a small set of instructions around what's on that particular load and what type of potential intervention steps need to be taken if that shipment is under distress. We've also worked to kind of develop an escalation pathway if our 3PL partners are non-responsive to that email process internally with our business. But we have great 3PL partners, UPS being one of them. And they've all gotten on board to understand once they receive an alert email notification from from TV Care that they need to act within a window of time to potentially drive an intervention action.
Perfect. Thank you, David. A great answer there. Very concise, as you know I like. Tim, I know this question was meant for David, but did you have any insights you wanted to share with our attendees on that specific question there? Any additional comments?
I would add that in addition to the shipments that have IoT devices on them, Transvoyant is also able to track non-censored, active censored shipments as well. With as little as the information you would find in a BOL, we can connect, a customer's freight to its conveyance and track that. So not all of Merck's loads are censored, and until that point, this is still a pretty valuable level of insight. During COVID, I think it served Merck very well. They were able to provide the team, the operations team in China, with visibility to what was coming in to those locations, because otherwise they would have been blind to that information. So this included censored and non-censored loads, which was pretty important. So that's where we began, the IoT thing, and the ability to consume the IoT information was always there. We're kind of an IoT company from the start, given our national intel and Department of Defense background. But I think it's also important to mention that you don't have to use IoT sensors in order to use Transvoyant's capabilities.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Jim. So we've had another question come in from Mohammed. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. But he's asked, what is the impact of the pandemic on your activities? That follows on quite nicely from what you were saying, Jim. So I'll dive in straight with you.
To me?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, David's kind of mentioned it already. I just mentioned, everybody, not just Merck, but all of our customers, during COVID, during Suez, during events in Colombia and South Africa and other places, immediately want to understand, what they have either, going into these areas or coming out of these areas. And everyone measures the risk differently, to the extent that we actually can get down to the value of the freight or the value of the merchandise, being shipped. They want to know, what's at risk from an order standpoint, revenue standpoint, and our ability to serve that information up as early as possible gives our customers' operations teams time to react and take corrective action. In Merck's case, really, customer service is paramount. So, if there's time for them to expedite a shipment of the same product, they'll do so. So it's those types of actions and activities that I think we enable.
Perfect. Thank you, Jim. David, any other comments to add there?
I think my additions here would be how quickly you can react during the events. Things were happening fast, and Transvoyant was quickly able, as a partner, to light up the nodes that were being impacted on the map, right? And were able to work with us to create dashboards around port impacts that were going to be impacted due to the pandemic event. And of course, like Jim said, we were able to kind of easily create a inbound view of those shipments that were going to be impacted, which weren't all censored shipments. So I think it was this this idea too to be able to react quickly and use the platform in interesting ways to help support the scenario planning that was happening kind of in real time at that point, and understand, you know, key lanes being impacted, and help us have that, Jim says situational awareness, right? Like have the ability to improve the outcomes based on the data that we have in real time.
Perfect. Thank you, David. So for our next question is, what are the IoT devices? What IoT devices do you use? Is it for temperature monitoring or shipment tracking, or for both? How reliable are these IoT devices? David, I'll come back to you on this one first as well, and then we'll jump to Jim at the end.
Yeah. So like I said, our base case for IoT visibility was to be able to monitor both for temperature and other health metrics of the shipment while in transit, light, shock, humidity. We only focus specifically on light and temperature at the moment, and we use them obviously to track globally as well with GPS location. We're using a lithium battery powered device right now, so we do have some limitations in terms of how many devices we can actually deploy on our global shipments that we send around the world. Reliability, you know, it does depend, right? Like if this thing is in the belly of the cargo ship, we will have some intermittent connectivity issues when the ship is close to shore and should be communicating via the broadband networks that it's connecting to, and GPS. There's challenges there. However, that's where we start to rely on the direct tracking, the vessel tracking, even though we've lost some of the condition of the actual product inside the container itself. And you know, we're continuing to look at ways to improve that reliability with the devices, but there are some gaps that you think that you need to be aware of around when devices are going to provide you the information you're expecting to get.
Perfect, thank you. Jim, anything to add to what David mentioned there?
You know, we're agnostic to the hardware and infrastructure. We work with a variety of IoT device manufacturers and have API connections, you know, to pull. So whatever they're able to provide in terms of data, temp, tilt, light, shock, that kind of stuff, we can consume and serve it up as actual intelligence. You know, many of our customers, it's not just a single device, it's multiple devices in some instances. And, you know, we believe this is a good position for us to take. You know, we had opportunities years ago to actually get in the device business, and we opted not to. And if you think about the pace of innovation in this space and how rapidly costs are coming down, and we've had the ability to kind of see, you know, some technologies that kind of are up the road a little bit. It's mind-boggling, some of the innovation that's occurring here. So, you know, I think again, it's important to have that in mind when considering solutions like this.
Perfect, thank you. So Jim, following on quite nicely from that, you know, how long does it take to implement a transvoyant solution?
It's weeks to months is the answer. It's very dependent upon the number of integrations, the data readiness. You know, in the case with Merck, you know, they began using the system operationally before it was in production because it was serving up some very useful insights. But, you know, I think from the time we put boots on the ground to the time insights began, I think it was in about a 90-day period. So, which is pretty typical. We've seen faster for smaller implementations, and we've seen longer. But I think that's a pretty fair estimate, if you will.
Perfect, thank you. And David, to round up our discussion today, would you be able to expand on the interaction between the Merck team and the transvoyant team in the support of your daily operations?
Yeah, absolutely, Emily. You know, maybe to go back to my previous comments, you know, we've worked closely with our internal team first on developing a set of business rules based on our stability profile of our products and how do we interact and create upper and lower boundaries for alert monitoring, which generates a large set of potential signals that go outbound. So I think one of the things we worked closely with Transvoyant and their TV care team on was how do we work through some of those false signals that we're going to get from time to time, whether or not it's at origin location and sits within a geolocation, so we don't create a lot of noise to our 3PL partners and say, this shipment's in distress and it hasn't left the door yet, right? Somebody turned on the monitor and it signaled something first. But, we worked with them too on, what are the business rules when they do get the alert? How do they generate emails, document and track responses in the system from our 3PLs, so we have a log of events to go back on in terms of what actions were taken. And if, in fact, there were some sort of discard, we can use that in the CAPA and disposition processing for the products with our QA group. So, it's been really positive to have a group that sits people who sit within our virtual control tower, basically, that drive those actionable insights and ensure that our product is being looked after. And it's something then that we could alleviate or remove from our team. Because when we started with these insights and all of these alerts coming to our team, and our team kind of being the ones who would triage them out. And so from an operational perspective, that would not have been sustainable. So having them there as that layer to support what we do has been a critical part. And I'm trying to figure out new ways to use the TV care team to support other insights that are coming through, and working with TV and their team on how to have them further help us be more situationally aware.
Perfect. Thank you, David. We've just had one last question come in from the attendees. And I know, James, you've actually just got back to the attendee himself, but I just wondered if you wanted to say your question, your answer verbally to the rest of the attendees too. On can Transvoyant start at origin, specifically for air transit, and provide full detail to destination and provide real-time updates?
Most definitely, yes. We're all modes, all nodes globally. So the answer is yes, emphatically.
Perfect. And a great question to end on. So with that, we've actually come to the end of today's panel webinar. Thank you to our panelists, Jim from Transvoyant and David from Merck, and to our chairperson, Anakin, who had to jump off at the end there. You all did a great job, as I'm sure all other attendees can agree. If you didn't manage to get your questions in or share them with our experts during the Q&A, please feel free to reach out to the team at Pharma Logistics IQ or any of the speakers directly. Their contact details can be found in the speaker widget on the left-hand side of your screen. This session will be available on demand very soon, so please do share it with any of your colleagues who are unable to join us today. Don't forget to also download the content pieces featured just below the presentation slides. And this concludes today's webinar. We look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
David. Take care.